I was standing in the cereal aisle at Kroger on a Wednesday morning when I saw my son-in-law's truck parked outside. That wouldn't have bothered me except my daughter had called me 20 minutes earlier saying she was homesick with a stomach bug. Her car, a 2019 Honda CR-V I'd co-signed on 2 years ago and quietly paid off as a birthday gift, was not in that parking lot. His truck was. And sitting in the passenger seat, applying lipstick in the visor mirror, was his mother. I stood there with a box of Cheerios in my hand and watched her step out of that truck like she owned the parking lot. She walked into a florist next door. He came out of the hardware store 2 minutes later carrying a bag of something, tossed it in the back, and they drove off. I put the Cheerios back on the shelf and sat with that image the entire drive home. My daughter's name is Renee. She's 31 years old, sharp as a tack when she's not trying to keep the peace with everyone around her. That's her one flaw, if you can call it that. She keeps the peace at any cost. I used to think that was a virtue. Her mother, God rest her soul, was the same way. I've spent the better part of 30 years learning that being agreeable isn't the same as being safe. Her husband's name is Dorian. I want to be fair when I describe him, because fairness matters, especially to a man who spent 26 years as a contracts attorney before retiring 2 years ago. So here is my fair description of Dorian. He is charming in exactly the way a man is charming when he needs something from you, and quiet in exactly the way a man is quiet when he's already decided you don't matter. I didn't dislike him when they first started dating. I want to say that plainly. He had a job, project manager, at a mid-sized construction company outside Columbus. He treated my daughter well in public. He was polite to me, asked about my career, remembered small things I mentioned. I thought he was attentive. I understand now that there's a difference between attentive and calculating. His mother, Nadine, was a different situation from the start. The first time I met her was at a dinner Renee organized. A nice restaurant downtown, white tablecloths, the kind of place where you lower your voice automatically when you walk in. Nadine arrived 20 minutes late, sat down, looked at the menu, and said, loud enough for the table next to us to hear, "This place is a little much, isn't it?" She didn't say it to be funny. She said it to establish something. I filed that away. I am a man who files things away. 26 years in contract law will do that to you. You learn to notice the first sentence, because the first sentence tells you everything about what the other person thinks the negotiation is actually about. Renee and Dorian got married 3 years ago. Small ceremony, just family and close friends, backyard of a place they rented in Hudson, Ohio. It was a good day. I walked my daughter down the aisle between 2 rows of folding chairs and white ribbon, and I was happy. That is the truest thing I can say about that day. I was genuinely happy. The first year was fine. Second year, less so. I started noticing things the way you notice a small leak. You don't want it to be a leak, so you tell yourself it's condensation, it's nothing, it'll dry up on its own. Renee would cancel plans with me at the last minute. Not often, just occasionally. She'd seem distracted on the phone, careful about what she said. She stopped mentioning Nadine in conversation, which was actually more telling than when she used to mention her too much. Then she got pregnant, and everything shifted. I'm not going to pretend I understand postpartum depression the way a clinician does. But I watched my daughter go through something after my grandson was born that scared me more than I've admitted to her. She got quiet in a way that wasn't her kind of quiet. She stopped cooking, which she loved. She stopped calling me on Sunday mornings, which was our thing. Had been our thing since her mother passed. When I asked her about it, she said she was just tired. New baby, not sleeping, totally normal. Her doctor, apparently, had told her to reduce stress, to keep her environment calm, to avoid confrontation. I found out later, much later, that Dorian had been using that medical advice like a key. Anytime Renee wanted to say something, push back on something, question something, he'd bring up her doctor's instructions. You're not supposed to be getting upset, remember? She told me about it months after the fact, in a voice so flat and matter-of-fact that it took me a minute to understand what I was hearing. He'd found the one tool she couldn't argue with, and he'd used it until it was worn down to nothing. Back to the Kroger parking lot. I drove home, and I sat in my kitchen, and I drank a cup of coffee, and I thought about what I'd seen. My son-in-law and his mother out and about together on a Wednesday morning. My daughter homesick. Her car, my car, technically until I'd signed the title over to her. Nowhere in sight. I called Renee. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, Dad. Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling? A little better. Still staying in today, though. Is the baby okay? He's good. Sleeping. I didn't ask about the car. Not yet. I said I hoped she felt better. I'd bring soup by if she wanted. She said she was fine. We hung up. I sat there for another 20 minutes. Then I called my nephew. He works in insurance fraud investigation and he has access to certain databases that a private individual technically shouldn't ask about. I'm not proud of that sentence, but I'm not ashamed of it either. I told him what I'd seen. I asked him to look into Dorian's mother, specifically whether she'd ever been involved in any civil disputes involving property or vehicles. He called me back in 4 hours. Nadine had 2 small claims, court appearances in the last decade. Both involved property she claimed ownership of that the other party disputed. Both settled. Neither appeared to have gone well for the other party. She was, my nephew said with a kind of careful neutrality, someone who knows how these things work. That was enough, but I still didn't say anything to Renee, because here's what 26 years of contract law taught me. You don't raise a concern until you can back it up. You don't show your hand before the other person has shown theirs. And most importantly, you do not put a person in a position where they have to choose sides before they're ready, because they will choose wrong, and then you've lost access entirely. So I waited. The following Tuesday, Renee called me in the middle of the afternoon. I could hear the baby in the background, doing that low-level fussing that means he's tired but not desperate. She said, "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you not to react." I said, "Okay." She said, "Do you remember signing the title over to me on the CRV?" I said I did. "I need you to tell me what that means legally, like whose name is on it." "Your name," I said. "It's your car, Renee. I transferred it to you clean." There was a pause that lasted too long. "Okay," she said. "Okay, sweetheart. I'm fine, Dad. Where's your car?" Another pause. The baby fussed. I heard her move to another room and close a door. "Dorian let his mother borrow it," she said. "A few weeks ago. She needed it because her car was in the shop. And then her car came out of the shop. But she said she needed it a little longer for something, and then, I don't know. They kept getting extended, and I asked about it, and Dorian said I was making it into a big deal, and that I was stressing myself out, and, Renee, I know, Dad. That's your car? I know. Does she have a key?" She took the spare. I set my coffee cup down very carefully on the counter. "Does she have your registration?" Silence. "She asked to see the paperwork," Renee said, "because she wanted to make sure the insurance was current before she drove it." I closed my eyes. "Dad, I'm here." She didn't give it back. I asked her how long the car had been gone. 6 weeks. I asked her how she'd been getting around. Uber, the train, Dorian driving her. I asked her if she'd asked for it back directly. She had, twice. Both times Dorian intervened, told her she was being difficult, reminded her his mother was doing them a favor by not making a fuss about various things. I asked her what various things. She didn't want to say I didn't push. "Has she said anything about the car?" I asked. "Nadine, directly." "She said she might need it for another month," Renee said. "She said it was easier than dealing with her own car situation. She said..." A pause. "She said that when you help family, you don't put a timeline on it." I said, "Dad, I don't want to cause problems." "You're not going to cause problems," I said. "I am." "Dad, I'm not going to do anything dramatic. I'm not going to do anything dramatic. I'm not going to show up at her door. I'm just going to make a phone call." Renee was quiet for a moment. "What kind of phone call?" "The kind I know how to make," I said. "Here's what people don't always understand about property law in Ohio. A vehicle title is not a suggestion. It is a legal document. When my daughter's name is on that title and someone else is driving that vehicle without her consent, even if it started as a friendly lending arrangement, and especially when that person has retained the registration documents, that situation has a name. It's called unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. In Ohio, that's a first-degree misdemeanor. And if the intent to permanently deprive can be established, and 6 weeks of just a little longer with the paperwork in her possession starts to look a lot like that, it moves into different territory entirely. I called a former colleague. We'd worked opposite sides of a commercial dispute about 15 years ago and had been friendly ever since. She now practices primarily in civil litigation but keeps her criminal referral network current. I explained the situation. She listened, without interrupting. which is the mark of a good attorney. They don't perform listening. They actually do it. She said, "Do you want to start with a demand letter, or do you want to go straight to filing a report?" I said, "I want to start with a letter. Sent certified, return receipt requested, to both her address and Dorian's. Giving them how long?" 72 hours, I said. "To return the vehicle and the registration to my daughter at a time and location of her choosing. And if they don't, then we file," I said. And I let the process work. She drafted the letter that afternoon. It was precise, and it was cold, and it was exactly right. It cited the relevant Ohio statute. It named Nadine specifically. It copied Dorian as a secondary party. It made clear that the vehicle in question had a title holder, and that title holder had not consented to the extended retention of both the vehicle and its documents. It used the word retention very deliberately. She sent it the next morning. I didn't tell Renee about the letter until it was already sent. I know some people would disagree with that. But I knew my daughter. I knew that if I told her first, she would have asked me not to do it. She would have said, "Give it more time." She would have said she didn't want to make things worse. And I love my daughter more than I have words for. But I had watched a man use her good nature against her for 2 years, and I was not going to let her good nature cost her one more thing. The return receipt came back on Friday. Nadine had signed for her copy. Dorian had signed for his. Saturday morning, Dorian called Renee. She told me about it afterward. He was upset. Her word was agitated. He said the letter was completely unnecessary, that it was an overreaction, that his mother had every intention of returning the car, that this was my fault for getting involved in their marriage. Renee told me she listened to all of it and then said very quietly, "Where's my car, Dorian?" He said his mother would bring it by Monday. Renee said, "I'd like it by tomorrow afternoon." He said that wasn't possible. She said, "Then I'll be letting my father know, and I imagine the next call you receive won't be a letter." He brought it back Sunday evening. Nadine was not with him. He set the keys on the kitchen counter without saying anything, and he left. The registration was in the glove box where it had always been. There was a dent on the rear bumper that had not been there before. Renee sent me a photo of the car in the driveway. Just the car. No caption. I sat with that photo for a while. I want to be honest about what the following weeks looked like, because this isn't the kind of story where everything resolves cleanly and everyone lives in peace. Real life doesn't give you that, and I'm suspicious of anyone who tells you it does. Dorian was cold to Renee for most of that month. Nadine stopped coming around, which was, and Renee admitted this herself, actually a relief she hadn't known she needed. There were hard conversations between Renee and Dorian that I wasn't part of and don't need to be. She's a grown woman. She gets to have her marriage in private. What I can tell you is that she started calling me on Sunday mornings again, first time in almost 8 months. She also, somewhere in there, found a therapist. She mentioned it once, casually, the way you mention something when you're testing whether it's safe to say it out loud. I told her that was a good thing. She said, "I know, I should have done it a long time ago." I said, "You're doing it now." And we left it there. The dent on the bumper was $340 to fix. I paid for it. I didn't ask Dorian to reimburse me. That wasn't the point. I've learned that some things you do because they need doing, not because you expect anything back. About 6 weeks after the car came home, Renee called me on a Thursday evening. The baby was in the background making happy noises, which is a different kind of sound than fussing. I could tell she was in the kitchen. She said, "I talked to Dorian last night." "Okay," I said. I told him that I needed things to be different. I told him that what happened with the car and some other things I hadn't said out loud to him, couldn't happen again, that I needed to feel like I could talk to him without it being used against me. How did he take that? A pause. "He cried," she said. "I don't know what to do with that yet." "You don't have to do anything with it yet," I said. "You just said what you needed to say. That's enough for right now." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Were you scared when you sent the letter? Did you think about what might happen if it made things worse?" I thought about that honestly before I answered. "Yes," I said. "I thought about it, but I kept coming back to the same thing. The risk of doing nothing was already happening. The only question was whether I was going to participate in it or not." She didn't say anything for a bit. The baby made a sound like a small, satisfied question. "He's going to crawl soon," she said. The doctor thinks maybe a month. Don't let him near the stairs. She laughed. It was a real laugh, not a polite one. I know the difference. I've been a father for 31 years. I've made more mistakes in that role than I'm comfortable counting. I was too focused on work for too long. I missed things I shouldn't have missed. I thought providing was the same as being present, and I was wrong about that for more years than I'd like to admit. But I am still here, and I am paying attention now. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that turns out to be enough. My grandson is going to crawl in about a month. His name is Emmett, the one name in this whole situation that nobody argued about. Renee picked it from a list she'd been keeping since she was a teenager, she told me. She always knew if she had a boy, she'd name him Emmett. I'm going to be there when he crawls for the first time. I've already cleared my calendar. Some things you just don't miss.